The body is the only ship you'll ever need. And the soul is not waiting for you after death. It's touching you right now through the only organ that can translate spirit into flesh, your central nervous system. When scientists push the world's most powerful electron microscopes to their limit, they can follow a nerve axon deeper and deeper, past myelin, past neurofilaments, past even microtubules, till the last clear protein structures fade. One more level of magnification, and biology dissolves into a shimmering cloud of pure probability. And that is where direct seeing begins. The cloud reveals itself as pure, coherent light. The same light that is your own awareness. Your nerves are the living antenna of the soul, your exact life purpose encoded as chemistry, translated into emotion, into desire, and into action. The entire chain runs through one critical layer, the emotional body. The emotional body is the gravity generator. And every ancient culture mapped this layer, they just use different names. In Egypt, they call it the Ka and the Ba. Your living double and your winged soul bird working together as the feeling, magnetic body that survives death. In India, they call it the Manomaya Kosa, or the sheath of mind and emotion that literally pulls life towards you. The Greek mysteries called it the okema, the invisible vehicle driven by desire and sympathy. Remove the emotional body and you lose gravity, sexuality, creativity, and the ability to fully incarnate. Earth's own gravity is simply her emotional body holding her children close until they grow the same unconditional love inside themselves. That is why the Hopi speak of the Spider Woman, Hindus of Prithvi, the Norse of Yoro, and Aboriginal people of the Dreamtime Mother. They're all describing the same living embrace, and science now calls it the Schumann resonance, or 7.83 hertz, which is the Earth's heartbeat. When your heart and brain lock into coherence with the Schumann through real love or gratitude, your body literally weighs less on a scale, which was documented by the Soviets and the Chinese. Fear makes the body heavier. Love makes it lighter. So, gravity is not fixed. It's responsive to frequency. And so, Mother Earth only loosens her embrace when the child has grown inside himself the same fierce, unconditional love that she has always had for him. Until then, she keeps pulling lifetime after lifetime, until we love as fiercely as she does. That is why the masters could walk on water or fly. They matched the mother's frequency, and the umbilical cord of gravity dissolved. Many extraterrestrial lineages removed the emotional body thousands of years ago because they judged feeling to be inefficient. Zeta Reticuli, Orion Tall Grays, certain Nordic, Pleiadian, and Syrian offshoots all made the same choice at different times, and they all became long-lived, brilliant, weightless, and unable to love. And so they return now not as conquerors, but as starving witnesses, watching the branch of the family tree that kept their hearts, waiting to see if we can ascend with our hearts still beating. Thought is colonized, intelligence is not. Thought is programmable, repetitive, and external. Intelligence is direct perception that synthesizes the present moment without yesterday's programming. That's how the control system works. It keeps our thoughts spinning so we never notice our final cage, white light itself, which has been split into 7 colors. Those 7 colors are prison bars, because every color has an opposite, and as long as we believe the rainbow is the whole of reality, we stay locked in duality. Real light lives beyond 7 colors, and every unbroken lineage gave it a name. The Tibetan Osol, or the clear light darker than any darkness because nothing stands against it. The Gnostic black sun shining in the pleroma. The womb, where the first archangelic powers were born, still whole, inside of God. The Kashmir Prakasa, glowing in utter darkness. And the Hermetic light that shines in the darkness, and the darkness has never put it out. When this uncolored light finally becomes our steady perception, not by chasing visions, not by forcing love, but when the emotional body has matured and love has become the steady frequency of your nervous system, thought quiets, intelligence takes over, and the act of looking for something at all dissolves. There is only this original light, seeing, and it has never been separate from anything it sees. That is the moment the prison bars disappear. Not because you escaped the body, but because the body itself has shifted into the same uncolored light that was always free. Every cell, every nerve, every microtubule now emits and receives the original dark light frequency. And so, matter is no longer dense to itself. It has become transparent to the soul that was never trapped inside it to begin with. And that is the exact mechanism Paul described in 1 Corinthians 13:12. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. The resurrection is not escape from the body, it is the resurrection of the body. When enough of us raise consciousness inside this flesh, matter around us begins to obey different laws because we have changed the information field inside that matter. That is humanity's reason for being here, to spiritualize matter from the inside out, until the body itself becomes the light. And when that day comes, the parasitic entities lose their food. The clones in the ship either remember emotion or dissolve, and the sky will not open with trumpets, it will grow quiet. And those who belong here will finally be able to walk barefoot on a planet that has become safe for love. Remember, the body is the only ship you will ever need. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you next time. Hey everyone, welcome back. That's right, as promised, there is more. And so I wanted to share this interview between Dr. Sala and Dr. Clements, or at least part of it. I think it's very important. I shared it on my Telegram feed. And I generally share content on my Telegram feed that I think either is just something you might want to know, and a lot of times it reinforces or corroborates some information that I have shared. For your information, my information comes to me anecdotally, which is to say it's all firsthand derived. And so I've either learned through deduction, cause and effect, monitoring the causal relationship between things, as I've written about in my book, and I say often, we find out who we are by understanding who we are not. And so, the information that I share comes from me. I'm a very self-focused individual in the sense that I'm not going to adopt someone else's point of view just because they told me to. I never have. That's why I didn't make it through high school without finding a way to get thrown out, because I didn't agree. I saw through it. I've always seen through it, and I've always trusted my inner counsel. And my inner counsel, I think, is my connection to the Creator or God. I've always just sort of had a connection, and that's what I listen to. That's what I trust. That's what leads me. That's what we mean when we say, turn our will and our life over to God. Let God drive. Just listen. Try and hear what God's trying to tell us. So that's why I find people like Dr. Clements here so fascinating, because he and I have never spoken. I mean, he and I couldn't be more different, and yet here we are arriving upon the same conclusions, more or less. I will go into a little bit about where I think Dr. Clements has a bit more understanding to sort of arrive upon. But by and large, we're both seeing the same picture, especially when it comes to this three-eye atlas and sort of what's going on. And, I came out with my last video essentially saying that everything is working together to sort of help our frequencies rise. And, I said, I don't care if it's a rock or, some sort of starship, interdimensional starship. What it's doing is it is harmonizing the frequencies here on Earth. And I sort of went out on a limb with that because that came from me, and I said that back when people were still sort of in doubt. And since I sort of came out with that, I've noticed the harmonization of the narrative around Three Eye Atlas, which is that they are essentially reverse engineering the grid, the control grid that has kept humanity dysregulated, scrambled, basically, because that's what the control grid does. It scrambles our frequencies. And so we kind of have to rush to reorganize or reharmonize our frequencies back into alignment. And that's what we do when we say, I don't believe that. I'm going to go with my gut on this. That's what we do when we reject bad recommendations. That's what we do when we overcome fear, right? When we choose love, when we choose love, not fear. That's what we're doing. We're reharmonizing our collective frequency and our frequencies as individuals, because that's essentially what we do everywhere we go. And our captors have always known this. If we anchor frequencies and then the environment changes to meet our frequency. That's a big reason why there's so much misinformation about everything being genetic, right? Like addiction is genetic. You find your predisposition to getting cancer is genetic. You were just born with it. You're screwed. And that's not true. And I've always known that. And I've actually ruffled a few feathers by saying, I disagree. I don't think so. I think it's actually the exact opposite, which is the way things work in an inverted reality. I think it's all environmental, not genetic at all. I don't think we're predisposed to anything. I think what creates the predisposition is creating the mindset that we are predisposed, and then we will become predisposed because that's what we think. And so we can go into any environment and reharmonize it. And I have been doing that now for decades, fully aware that when I go someplace, it changes. And that's what they don't want us to figure out. And so what happens when we start to reharmonize ourselves, right? We reharmonize everything around us in the process. And so that's why I say, it is not your job to accept the fact or to own what was done to you in a lot of cases, because that was because of someone else's damage, not yours. They projected their damage upon you and tried to make you just as damaged as they. That's what psychological projection and narcissism, which are the two primary technologies being used to destroy the human soul right now, that's their primary mandate: destruction, scramble, dysregulate, fragment, explode into pieces, right? But when we recalibrate ourselves, we own that it's not our job to take responsibility for the sick things that were done to us, but it is our job to fix them, right? That's what forgiveness is. That's, when I talk about forgiveness isn't pardoning. Forgiveness is letting go of that dysregulated energy that's ruining your life. That's the poison, right? When we say revenge is like drinking poison and expecting your adversary to die. That's better. So when we take personal accountability and responsibility for what was done to us, and we start choosing love over fear regularly, we reharmonize and recalibrate our environment. And that's kind of what everyone is watching and waiting to see. How quickly can we reharmonize our environment after overcoming the spells that have been done to us? And the little sort of gap in the logic that I'm noticing is that no one's saying what I'm saying, which is that it was done to us. Everyone's just sort of picking up the part where it's like you have to clear where you are. And we do. But we have to acknowledge that there are dark, evil species with technology that can scramble our brains, with agendas that are to destroy, kill, harm, and they're applying that to a species that is inherently peaceful. We have more in common, like with butterflies and rabbits when it comes to our mentality, than we do with, warrior species like reptilians. We are a peaceful species. We are fractals of God, which means we inherently are creators, which means we are constantly in the process of manifesting an environment that is conducive to everyone winning. That's the primary difference between being a creator and a destroyer. Inherently, creators want everyone to win. Creators want everyone to experience the life that they want. Whereas destroyers proceed from the premise that in order for me to be successful, you must not be successful. That's what competition is. That's what capitalism is. Like, I must beat you. And that is false. And that is a spell that has been cast over humanity. And it's fading. We're realizing this collectively. And this is why things are changing. But the point I'm making is that, when I look at these off-world species and sort of the game they're playing, I liken it to a corporate structure. And I think actually corporate structures are alien technology. I don't think we invented the corporate structure. I think, that was a gift from probably reptilians. And I've spent a good part of my life doing the corporate thing. And what I learned in corporate is that middle management, the team that's usually tasked with implementing the high-minded goals of the executive level, the C level, if you're middle management carrying out the mandates of the executive level, executives tend to move on to the next thing and trust that who they've appointed at the middle management level are going to take it from there. And what we're seeing on Earth is that we had upper management sort of leave our planet in the care of what I liken to sort of babysitters, but that creepy babysitters. Upper management left middle management here to watch over us, and that's like mom and dad leaving the kids under the care of some creepy babysitter. And in that creepy babysitter scenario, the kids invariably get harmed, and the babysitter can't help himself because he's just sort of a gross pervert, that does bad things to children, but never takes responsibility for it. In fact, the creepy babysitter will usually try and cover his or her tracks after doing a bad thing. They try and clean up the crime scene. And we're in the midst of a crime scene right now. Planet Earth is a crime scene. And middle management has basically, the creepy babysitters have been left to sort of watch over humanity and give reports back to upper management. And I think they've been giving bad reports. I think they've been doing some shoddy reporting. And upper management can't figure out why humanity can't really seem to get their act together. And middle management is just sort of like, we don't know. Gosh, boss. These humans, they really are pesky. But what they're leaving out in their reporting is that they have been, they inverted our reality so that up is down and down is up, so that bad is good and good is bad. They're basically, if you've watched enough of my videos, they're corrupting us. And they've even co-opted some of our human brethren. And there seems to be a collection of either hybrid humans or evil off-world species pretending to be humans that are the primary driving forces behind the corruption of humanity. And so these co-opted individuals are working alongside overtly non-human individuals to, over time, give the impression that human beings are inherently bad. Again, this is the inversion. This is narcissism, right? This is gaslighting. And that we're sort of irreparable. And so I see these monitoring vessels or intergalactic objects monitoring for growth, change. I liken it to bias, right? Bias has a lot to do with cause and effect. If you think of bias, if you have a bias, it creates a pull or a push, right? It's a system of leverage, bias. And so and I've heard Sasha Stone talk about vectors. You know, I agree with the vector concept. We have multiple vectors that are arriving upon a triangulation. And so we have the rise of human consciousness as sort of one vector. And as human consciousness rises, we have the event that's going to just sort of rewrite Earth reality quickly, right? Because bit by bit to rebuild Earth reality using nothing but the anti-rational Earth reality systems, right? Roads, construction, telecommunication, like wires. We're not going to rebuild it that way. We're not going to use bulldozers to pull up the road, all the roads that don't need to be here. It's going to happen in a way that we're not aware of yet, because everything we've been doing thusly is wrong. And so you can't fix a situation with the same thinking that got you into the broken situation in the first place, right? You can't use the same thinking that got you into the ditch to get you out of the ditch. So how things are going to be remedied, you know, we can't think of it in conventional terms. We can't think of it in terms of how it's always been. It's going to be something we've never seen before. And so that's another vector that's sort of approaching. And on top of all that, you know, the final sort of vector or bias that are sort of collapsing into a singularity is the help or lack thereof we're going to receive from living-based technologies, nothing synthetic or artificial, and that's where the Arcturians come in, because they represent living tech that will help us recalibrate back to this triangulation, you know, where I have these three sort of converging vectors. And what they're trying to realize in the interim is what specific living technology is going to be required in order to help us reharmonize sort of over the final hump. And that's what Clements talks about, and that's what I alluded to in my last video. We're going to create an environment that is inhospitable for beings of a certain mindset, beings with intentions, you know, that don't calibrate to the frequency that's going to be established, that is our innate frequency as humans, that has sort of been stolen from us. That's essentially what I said. I don't know how successful I was, but that's what I was saying. Right? Everything's working together to pull everything back into order through effortless action, or wu-wei, was the premise of my last video. Whether it's, you know, creating a galactic bubble around our solar system that if you're below a certain frequency, you can no longer exist. Now, what they can't do when they're recalibrating our solar system is kill off all the innocent humans who are still calibrated sort of at the frequency of our captors, because a lot of us are running around backstabbing, destiny swapping, saying terrible things about people that don't deserve to have terrible things said about them, and on and on and on and on. Just anything to sort of keep you reptilian. And so if they sort of crank up the amplitude too fast, some people who have found it challenging to get out of those lower densities will just cease to exist, more or less. I mean, it's just like when you ignore something, it goes away. And that's essentially what we'll all start doing when we start focusing on, light, or what our friends in nature are up to, or just sort of the daily mundanity of being a galactic level sovereign free human. Like, life becomes so simple and uncomplicated. It just becomes almost a daily dalliance. Because everything we need is here and provided for us. Like, we've been convinced that planet Earth is sort of a hostile environment and that Mother Nature is sort of out to get us, and it's just not. It's all here. Like, you just walk out your door and you have an apple and you're good for the day. Like 3,000 calories, like, give me a break. And so, as these people who are still caught up in all the duality and the conflict and the cause and the effect and the revenge, right? And they would simply cease to exist if they pumped up the amplitude too fast. And this is why they're calibrating. They're calibrating. So as we take a step towards them, they're taking a step towards us through this calibration of the frequencies. And as we demonstrate, one behavioral modification at a time, like, Michael, today is not a good day for you to partake in cigarette smoking. You have to keep your vessel pure today, because today the earth will be recalibrating back to our original grid. So if you want to have a cigarette, save it till tomorrow. It would be what's best for everyone, because your vessel needs to be pure to sort of aid in this recalibration. Like, okay, I'll smoke tomorrow, not today. Today's not the right day. And little decisions like that from all of us basically indicate that we would rather exercise some discipline and put off short-term gratification, which is another one of these tricks that have been played on us, instant gratification. Put off the instant gratification so that we can do what's best for all in the now. And if you do that enough times over and over and over, your intentions become solidified. You are more about what's best for everyone else. You want everyone to win. Like, you'll put off having that smoke if it's what is required to help everyone rise. For example, right? But what does this come down to? Overcoming our reactions, right? What is picking up a drink, or, eating 10 chocolate chip cookies, or smoking a joint, plant medicine? It's sating a reaction to something that was upsetting and that we sort of feel in the body. Bad news, we'll say. Scary news, we'll call it scary news. And when, instead of becoming scared by scary news, you recalibrate and take, I don't want to say control, but you assume command and control of yourself and the way you are going to respond, not react, to the dysregulating stimuli. And when you decide to stay calm, when you decide to invoke your God self, the part of you, some people call it higher self, some people call it Holy Spirit. They're the same thing, just so everyone knows. HS stands for higher self, Holy Spirit. You can call it source, or you can call it God. But when you go into God mode rather than go into fear mode, and you assume a sort of playful or delightful countenance to this situation that's trying to scare you, and you take your power back because you know how to do it, for one. I mean, one of the things that all these people that say you just have to go with the flow, you have to stop being so scared all the time. Well, that's a lot easier said than done, especially if you have been deeply, deeply, deeply harmed, which a lot of these people who are successful, they have no idea the level of depravity that has been lived out on sort of innocent human beings. And that's fine. You know, I mean, I listened to Tucker on Sean Ryan the other day, and I actually deleted the comment, but there was this point in the interview, and 1 hour, 26 minutes and 52 seconds, when Sean says, Tucker, what is it? You know, what do you think the problem is? What is it? And Tucker's like, I don't know. And I'm over here like, if anyone wants to ask me what the problem is, I'll tell you. You know, the problem is we live in a trauma matrix, and we've been collectively traumatized for centuries. I mean, we don't really know how long it's been going on because they've lied about everything, including history. But we are all flipped inside out due to the trauma and the constant trauma, right? Like driving a car is trauma inspiring, and that is just as mundane could be. That is our everyday reality, and yet you take your life into your hands just going to get a quart of milk. So Tucker, you know, Sean, the answer is it's the trauma matrix that we're in. And not all of us decided to, you know, run off and become Navy SEALs and become federally sanctioned killers to overcome our fear. And not all of us, you know, have lineage that is in the CIA, you know, that can sort of explain, son, you know, there are just some things that if you want to continue being a Carlson, you just have to accept. We're not like everyone else. You know, your dad's in the CIA. And, you know, Sean's former CIA. So I look at that interview and this is what the CIA is ready to let us know, or that they're willing to be accountable for. And so when they get right, you know, and he was speaking a lot of truth in that interview, but right when it came to the critical apex of the discussion, Tucker said, I don't know. And it's, you know, it's the brainwashing that, you know, the organization that your dad works for, it's the organization that you used to work for, Sean, collectively, you know, working with off-world intelligence, off-world species, and God knows who else to ruin us with everything. You know, the screens, the laws, the fake laws, the bullshit laws, the bills, the corporations. That turns people into batteries or wealth generators or life force creators for parasites. And, you know, in order for us to sort of do that willingly, we have to be convinced to forget who we actually are. And that's what you know, if your dad's in the CIA, that's what your dad represents. He's sort of on that side of things. And so I could see that being a blind spot. And for anyone who's had basically a relatively easy childhood that didn't have to sort of go through it, you know, you're going to wonder, why can't they just change? Well, you know, we've all seen Clockwork Orange or the brainwashing footage, right? The person gets strapped in the chair and their eyes get held open and they just sit there and they get like all these disturbing images flash before, you know, the acid tests, MK Ultra. We know And that's our whole society has been, it's an MK Ultra based society, like everything. Like the reason why nothing makes sense is because it's not supposed to. That's how MK Ultra works. That's how they separate you from the truth of who you are. And that's hard to overcome. And yet some of us are out here proving that it can be overcome. I think that's one of the big questions for the people floating around in the spaceship. You know, can this be corrected? Is it possible to salvage these individuals that are here on this earth, or do we just have to wipe them all out? And, you know, again, I return to the creepy babysitter narrative. You guys did this. You're the ones who left us with the creepy babysitter. You're the one that left us with the child molesters. And it's our job to overcome what you guys did. And you have to know that at least one of us down here knows that that's what's going on. And so if you think you're just going to get rid of planet Earth and everything and everyone on it because it's unsalvageable, no. That I know, at least, that it wouldn't have been this way if you hadn't left us with the creepy babysitter. And so if you're just trying to clean up a crime scene, know that, you know, that's a violation of galactic law. You guys have to clean up your mess. And we'll do our part. I mean, we are, as you can see, and as I'm about to share, I'll roll this video here. We're actually doing better than you thought we would. And so I do think this is why we are starting to get help, right? It's triaging. This is what I experienced when my sister was in the hospital. Basically, the care staff, doctors, physical therapists, occupational therapists, the whole team, the nurses, they will work as hard as you're willing to work as a patient to make yourself better. And that's why I made sure my sister worked her ass off. And everyone there saw that this particular family was going to work to win. And that they damn well better be doing the same thing. And that's what I'm doing with my channel. And anyone, you know, who can sort of bear to listen to my content. You know, ultimately, you know, we want our planet back. We're doing this because we want victory. We're doing this so that whoever's watching can be aware of just how resilient humanity truly is and how powerful we truly are, despite your negligence and the inherent evil of the people who you entrusted us with or to. You can keep knocking us down, but we're going to keep getting back up. You can keep lying, but we're going to keep finding the truth. We're relentless. So it might be time for you guys to get on board. And I think that's what's happening. Anyway, let's listen to what Dr. Clements has to say. I think I've gone on long enough.
Yeah, well, so now I know that there's been a lot of interest in 3i Atlas, you know, what it is, what its impact is, and what kind of changes are looming for humanity as a result of it coming in to our solar system. So yeah, what have you learned? What can you share with the public?
Yeah, that's certainly got a lot of hubbub going, hasn't it? With across many communities for sure. It's it's an interesting one because I first heard about it when, you know, some of the images were coming back from NASA and suddenly all the data went clean and, you know, nothing was coming through. And then, you know, hearing a lot of information from different people. And I didn't take too much interest in it in the beginning, because we had Oumuamua that came through as well, and there are other objects that are there as well. And so somebody asked me, "Oh, what's your take on 3 Atlas and what's it all about?" And I said, "Okay, well, let's check in with the teams and see what they say." And it was a very interesting response, because their response was just to smile and said, "Would you allow yourself to see what's going to happen as things unfold?" And that was it, which was a very cryptic answer.
Right. And that's because they're waiting to see how much recalibrating we can do on our own. Again, these are these vectors that are triangulating into the final triangulation. How much of it we can recalibrate or reharmonize on our own. So we're allowing, right? They're observing, right? And it's very easy to monitor frequency. I can do it. Just sitting in the coffee shop, I know everyone's frequency. And so they're calibrating and, doing arithmetic, like probability. So as each one of us sort of raises our individual frequencies, that creates new probabilities. As we recalibrate back to the truth of who we are, that changes the probability for forces that are pitted against us. That changes the probable outcomes for what's going on here on Earth. And so it's a cryptic answer, and Clements doesn't really understand it, because I don't know what level of trauma he's had to reverse. I don't want to suggest that he's just had some glorious life, but he seems to not understand that their next move is based on our last move, if that makes any sense.
Which is not, normally what they would say. Now, when you asked me, I know we had a phone call conversation, and you asked me again, and I thought, let's check in again. And they did say that there are a number of other objects that are in the solar system, not just that one. And what my teams were, or mainly the Arcturians, but there are a number of other races that I have connections with, was saying is that in what's actually happening, they showed me, if you imagine the entire solar system, they showed me these huge vessels, which were Arcturian and other races as well. And this is the information I said that I bring you. These vessels are enormous. When I asked to gauge, how big these vessels were, they said, well, they're roughly about 1/80th the size of the moon. So these are extraordinarily large vessels. They're massive. And what they showed me the image is that these are all setting up this huge environmental bubble around the solar system. They are literally, from what I could glean from because some of it was very lofty concepts, so I had to kind of sit and be very patient with decoding what they were giving me. But essentially what they were saying is that the environment within the solar system is being changed. It's like a sort of protected bubble is being formed. And they were essentially directing what they call non-material energetics towards the sun, and they were modulating the sun. And so when I asked what was happening with that.
Again, right, this is everything. So if the sun is having its frequencies harmonized, that sun is feeding the plants, okay? Those plants are now carrying those reharmonized frequencies, right? They're now tied into the mycelial network, so they're communicating new information that's passed down from the sun. The animals, right? What are they being told through this photon, these photonic light codes? Because we get them, they recalibrate us, and all of this. We go out, we sun gaze, and we become recalibrated. And so what do we know? Well, we know that we're friends with nature, not enemies. Well, nature knows that they're friends with us. And so this is how everything is working together, right? Nature, benevolent or natural AI, and there is. Okay? Because it's all on the same networks. Like once you understand that we're all networked, you can understand how there are non-synthetic or living technologies that can interface with these synthetic technologies. They can use the same networks. They can ride the same fiber optic cables. It's light. And so this is what I meant, right? This is what he's saying. This is when I heard this, I was like, wow. Whoa. I nailed it. And that was for me to come out and say it, I mean, it's not like Donald Trump came out and said it. I don't have as much shit. I don't have anything to lose. But I said it. And guess what? That's what's happening. Why am I sharing that? Because that has been my mission from the beginning. I mean, do you all not see how this is coming to a culmination? And if you look back over the history of the information I've shared, it's what? The 17th letter operation, personal accountability and responsibility. Take your power back. Why? Because when you rise, we all rise. Because no one rises till we all rise. Because we're all, I mean, I wrote a book about it. You know, I've done an audiobook that no one's bought. And it all just is saying this. This is why. This is why we have to heal. And it's working. It's working.
And I said, okay, are there particle streams? Are there material streams involved with these? They said, no, there are some components like that, but largely it's non-material. And what they're doing is they're getting the sun ready for a kind of an ignition of energy. Now, I know a lot of people have talked about the solar flash and all sorts of other things like that. But they were saying it wasn't quite that. It was something very different. They said they would be, they are expecting that the sun would give off certain CMEs, certain ejections that would come off and matter streams. But the actual ignition of it was a non-material energy that would literally just sort of expand and engulf and expand throughout the solar system. And all planets were going to be affected by this in a very positive way. And so it's literally changing the environmental energetics, not just within the solar system, but within planets as well, within the solar system and all objects that were inside. And I didn't ask this question directly, but I got a sense, and again, this is my speculation here, is that I got the sense that they were changing the condition of the solar system so that in order to be within the solar system, you had to be of a certain caliber of energy. So in other words, they were kind of making this a protected space, if you can imagine that. And they said that building of that bubble has already begun. And to correlate with that, they're saying there is a series of waves that are going to start really ramping up beginning of December, and they're going to go all the way through 2026. And these are going to be a series of waves that are going to go up and then jump up and then jump up. And they're going to be modulated in a way that they're going to, they have ways of reading how people are dealing, how societies are dealing with these energy changes and impacts. And so they modulate it to get the best results after each wave comes through. And in addition to that, something is happening, and we can talk about this a little bit later about the Inner Earth teams that I've been connecting with also, because what they have gleaned to me is that something similar is happening within the core of the Earth. And I suspect, and they didn't say this directly, again, this is my suspicion, is that similar things are happening within the core of the planets within the solar system as well. And that is that there is something at the very core of the Earth, which is when I got this chance to bilocate and have this experience with this very advanced inner Earth civilization, which is very close to the core. Not, up in sort of like the outer mantle or anything like that. These were very deep. And what I could see was that the center was almost like a star at the center of the Earth. I don't know if that is in the same way that we know about our sun, but the light that was coming from the core was phenomenal. It was tremendous. And what they were saying is that expansive bubble, to coin a sort of physical interpretation of what's happening, is that it's expanding from the center of the Earth and it's approaching the surface of the Earth. And so at some point, there is going to be a tremendous change in energy within the inner levels of the Earth, but also on the surface of the Earth as well.
Well, before we kind of like dive deeper into that, I just wanted to first of all, just get an idea of this frequency bubble that 3i Atlas is causing in our solar system, because that's kind of huge news or huge development, that frequencies are being changed whereby those that have like a lower energy frequency, like polarity thinking, polarity behavior.
And this is essentially the end of the grid. This would be the grid finally coming down. This would be the scramble technology that I mentioned. This would be the descrambling, right? This would be the reharmonization of reality in the fall of the control grid. It's that grid that has scrambled, being bounced around by all these 5G towers and all these EMFs we've got everywhere, that has scrambled our own frequencies such that we don't get feedback on our manifestations when we're supposed to. They've modified galactic law so that when we put an intention out, we don't receive the results of our intention. And so we're just made to believe that we don't really have the power to manifest, when in fact it's been scrambled by these frequency scramblers. And so that's what they're doing. They're taking down the grid, which Michael's right. Dr. Sala's right. That is huge news.
I mean, what people might consider to be negative extraterrestrials,
Right.
that they can't stay in our solar system because of these energies that are being triggered by 3i Atlas, kind of like interacting with our sun and the planets.
Well, that's very interesting you mentioned that, because I was going to add to that when they gave me a sensation of what they were doing, the environment they were creating in the solar system was going to mean that those who have exactly what you just said, it would be incompatible with them to be here. So I think these massive, large scale, the scale of it is enormous. And so I think many things are playing a role, but in particular, when I asked about the 3i Atlas thing, they immediately took my attention towards these massive vessels that were performing this modulation of the sun and the inner environment of the solar system. So I think it's all interrelated. And they did mention that there are other objects like that in the solar system as well. So they didn't give me too much information about, what it is, what its particular functions is, those kind of things. But they really were keen to get me to see what the large scale solar system transition, what was actually happening energetically and what they were doing. And it really does come down to the fact that I feel that they are taking the solar system from what you might consider a stellar nursery, where lots of different things can happen, and moving it up energetically so that this becomes a more advanced energetic system. And if you're not compatible energetically, you're going to find it extremely difficult, almost impossible to be here. So and I think what's happening, you can kind of see that in general goings on. People who cling to old ways, cling to old energies, old paradigms, old attitudes, are finding it increasingly more difficult to continue about their day, because of all their their stuff. That's probably another word for it, but all their stuff is coming to the surface. And I know I laugh about that. It's not a laughing matter for people who are going through it, because it can be very difficult. But essentially, that's what's happening. And the energy environment, so the way I understand it, is all of our material makeup is sitting in a spatial fabric or structure, and that is what they're changing as well. It's the literal spatial fabric in which we sit is also undergoing this change. And so a whole slew of things, from the behavior
Etheric,
of energy, the physics,
right? The ether, the fabric of reality, right? That is what was scrambled. The ether, literally our canvas that we as humanity create from, right? Scrambled. That's a tall order. Like we can't meditate our way through that. So that's the help. And I think they're going to watch what happens when they remove the grid. That's that wait and see. Well, let's see what happens. Like, let's see what they want to manifest. Let's see who they are, when they're not having their thoughts scrambled. And that's why, my video about rebecoming wholesome, we have to purify. I shared a clip from Roseanne Barr, of all people, on my Telegram feed, because she basically said the same thing I said. Like, we've been corrupted. We need to admit our misdoings. We need to apologize. I shared a clip earlier today about that. Just apologize. Forgive and apologize. I see it firsthand, people who can't do either, and how their lives just get destroyed by their own stubbornness. And so I do think that they want to see who we really are, because none of us can really understand who we really are, while the very reality that we exist in has been completely inverted. Like, they have no control set, except for those of us, you included, who know we're being scrambled, who know everything, and yet continue day after day after day to anchor the divine. That's who they're watching. The lotus flowers that have emerged from the muck, who know all of it, and yet choose without hesitation divinity, who choose love over fear every single time. And that's why I say that we're doing it. You and I, the ones who are doing the work, we're the ones dragging humanity kicking and screaming into a better reality. And so God bless all of us for what we've been doing.
Of energy, all those things are undergoing these transformations, and it's having a massive impact on everything. And I heard from so many people that know people who used to be pretty stable and pretty sort of chilled, and they're having great difficulties now because all of their stuff is coming to the forefront. That in itself is a big subject in of itself. But it is a huge thing, and it does relate to these massive changes you mentioned about the galactic core. That also is playing a role, because the way that they showed me is stars have these interconnectivities with certain systems in the galactic core, and the galactic core to other sort of central suns and so on. It's almost like a fractalized stepping down of energetics through these different points, or stars, cores, whatever you want to call them.
Works.
So that the energy could emanate particular behaviors or particular sort of conscious codes in a particular region for life development in that particular region. And it's my understanding that us as a human species, we've been going through this experiment with free will for some time, and such a lot has been allowed because of that sort of experiment that's going on. But now that's about to change significantly, and it is becoming increasingly more difficult for anyone with negative orientations to maintain those. It's going to get much more difficult as time goes on. Definitely.
So with these energies that are coming in, the 3i Atlas is just one among a number of vessels that have arrived that are kind of like doing the modulation, disseminating frequencies, helping change the frequencies of our solar system and the planet and the sun. Now, does that mean that as this kind of like bubble increases and that the frequencies rise within that bubble, that we're not going to have the kind of earth splitting into 3 or 4 different timelines where those that are still trapped in 3D polarity thinking just get to go into another timeline or go to another solar system or something because they can't handle it here, and those that stay here are those that are kind of like comfortable with the 5D unified planetary consciousness. Or do you kind of see it all just kind of like organically moving towards this unified planetary consciousness where everyone just kind of like raises their consciousness and they just like accept this new reality?
Yeah, that's to start with that question. It's the way, and I know that when we spoke over the phone recently, the teams came through on that very question, and the way they see it is the way the potentials are unfolding. We're on a very, very prominent timeline, and we weren't, in their words, we were not expected to be this far ahead at this stage, 1, 2, 3 decades ago, because so much has changed. A lot of things, and it's mainly down to the fact that
There you go, guys. We're ahead of schedule. We're doing better than they thought, and that's because we're realizing that when I fix myself, I fix the world around me. That secret, the Hawkins map. One person at the frequency of love has the power to change 90 million people. Like, it does? Like, oh. And as a result, we're exceeding expectations.
A lot of people around the world have done the inner work. They've released archetypal ideas, all sorts of energies, etc. They've managed to stabilize higher energetics that allow this cumulative effect, where the planet can now be aligned in this very amazing prominent timeline. Now, in terms of these multiple Earth aspects, that from my understanding with what the teams have said is that what's happening is that there is tremendous support and help available to people, because they've said they can see a lot of people have been struggling. But the message that they wanted to give, and I got this message from them before we went live, that was that this transition can actually be incredibly simple. It doesn't have to be hard work. And they're saying the difficulty is, and they're here with me now, they're saying that most of humanity spends a great deal of time focusing on things outside of them, when in fact the ascension process is an internal ignition, and it's very much inside of you. Now, as the ignition starts ramping up, it's going to push out everything that's not compatible with that level of energy, which is old stuff. And it's not just this life, it's also things from previous lifetimes, even archetypal things from other planetary experiences that you may have had in different civilizations. And so this whole thing is being cleaned out. But because of, human nature, we're so used to grip and holding things down that we actually push back or buck.
It's called gravity. I mean, the reason why we're used to grip is, and I just talked about that in the video that precedes this special. That grip, right, is gravity. That's our emotional connection to our mother, and our mother's connection to us. And we've been in that grip because some evil reptilians decided to start scrambling human minds so that they could get away with doing whatever the hell they wanted with us, because we're pretty and we taste good, apparently. So again, just reminding everyone who's listening that it's not just human nature. Okay. Human nature was corrupted. Okay. Human nature was tinkered with, and y'all know how. And now you know, I know. It's not just human nature. It's human nature after, they've been kidnapped and thrown into a cold, dark, dungeonous basement for eternity. That will have an impact on your outlook, Dave, just so you know.
What should be quite an effortless flow forward of this stuff just moving out, and it's just kind of human nature. It's how many people have learned to deal with things. So the way I see it is there's quite a significant, because I know there have been a lot of predictions in the past about a relatively small percentage of the human race that was going to be able to make this jump. Now, from what the team said when we had that call, and what they're saying is now quite a significant large group is going to be able to make this. But they're saying even more can jump on this bandwagon if they just, they're saying if people would just relax and just literally go with their own flow and be less sort of mentally orientated about it. They're saying it's one of the big key hangups for humanity is thinking too much about things and trying to, sort of dissect things too much, because they're saying this is an experiential ride. This is a wave that will just literally ignite and move you up, and you'll suddenly be aware of things inside you that your mind was not able to probe because it doesn't work on those levels. It's a beautiful instrument, but it can get in the way if it gets too overbearing on what's happening. And so that's one of the things, and they always, whatever they come through, they always, when you think of the Arcturians, of the colossal things they have done, that the ships they have, the technologies they have are just immense. They always say, and I'll say it again, I'm sure I've said it on your show before, that when I was trying to work on a particular device and I was really trying to nitpick and go through all the mental gymnastics of how this thing was, working, it all just went blank. And I said, whoa, hang on, where's the signal? Where's the help gone? And I was getting quite frustrated. And they said, no, just settle down. You said, we were trying to show you there is a world of difference. And this is the exact words they use. There is a world of difference between living in your heart intelligence and coming from your mind intelligence. And they're saying that is one of the transformations, the very profound transformations that humanity is going through. We're being restored back to have a powerful mind, but it will be an extension of heart intelligence. And that's one of the offerings that they had. And these, like I said, these are the Arcturians who are intellectually very advanced, spiritually very advanced. They're advanced in all ways. And so that was their information, which I thought at the time was, wow, that's quite profound. I didn't expect that from, the Arcturians, but that's what they said.
Sounds like the Arcturians are listening to me. And I agree. I think there's a massive movement towards heart-centered intelligence. Right? Again, talked about the difference between information and intelligence. And I think that's happening because we're healing our bodies. The body is the vessel, right? So heal the body of the parasites, and then your thoughts are no longer parasitic, because they put the parasites into the body so that they can influence the brain, the thinking, the mind. And then the mind influences the heart, which is inverted, right? You just heard him say, first heart, then mind. The heart steers the mind, basically. The heart puts the mind to work. The heart gives the mind tasks to work on. But you can't do that until you've healed the body. And part of that, right, is the trauma stored in the fascia. And part of that is the cyclical thinking that's created by ravenous parasites that tell you you're hungry and you need food and drugs and sex and material things in order to feel like you matter. And as we're finding out more and more, as we sort of heal our bodies and we regain access to a clear mind, we can feel our mind sort of deferring to the heart. And just like when we say to God, your way, not my way, right? My way is here. God's way is in here, right? Your will, not my will. Your way, not my way. Ego, easing God out, right? Divinity, right? Letting God in. And this is the gatekeeper, right? But the body is what informs the gatekeeper, because they poisoned our bodies basically to betray our minds, which then mislead our hearts. I think that's a good place to stop. Anyway, I hope this was helpful. Certainly helped me. I was delighted when I watched this. And as usual, I had my own thoughts about certain aspects. And hopefully whoever needed to hear my thoughts has heard them and taken them into account. And that includes you. Hope it helped. And stick around, because coming up next, I've created an animated special that's sure to become an instant classic. And if you haven't already, get yourself a copy of my book, whether it's printed, the audiobook, or I've even got an ebook. And you can get that at connectneo.com/shop. Help me keep doing this. If you find this information helpful, help me help you. Yeah, so thanks for sticking in there and checking out what I had to share. Hope it helped. And stay tuned for, again, an animated classic pulled from chapter 3 of my book, We're Kept Unhealed for a Reason. All right. Thanks for sticking around. I'll see you next time. Karma is a collective issue. So if it's a private issue, it's coming to your door. The great karmic issues at this point are collective. Marianne Williamson. Hatred has us hostage because those who hate with conviction, and conviction is a force multiplier. The only thing that will prevail over hatred, having been turned into a political force, is for love to be turned into a political force. Marianne Williamson. It's time we love with conviction, loving those even from whom there is nothing to be materially gained. In other words, unconditionally. With the knowledge that when we love unconditionally, we forgive in the truest sense of the word. And when we forgive, we are forgiven. This is how the alchemical process of healing was meant to unfold. Healing illness at the root will not only heal the individual, it will heal the next generation of individuals. In this way, the cycle of disease will disappear, replaced by new, healthy minds and bodies, and souls that will flourish. Your life begins to end on the day you stop talking about the things that matter. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.